Board, Mr. Tuhin Kanta Pandey, the Secretary of DIPAM, to talk about how exactly the government is planning to reboot and recreate value in PSU stocks. PSU stocks of late have been on a tear. Given that markets are now refocusing on industrial and cyclical stocks, there is deep value in PSU stocks, which some of the market men are realizing. What exactly is the Department of Disinvestment planning to do with some of the mega disinvestments, and how exactly are they planning to bridge the gap, which now is a very obvious gap, given that this year has been tough year for everyone in the economy because of the pandemic? Mr. Pandey, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Before I start, let me extend season's greetings to you from behalf of ET Now to you and your family.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Pandey, while PSU stocks of late may have made a comeback, you would agree with me when I say that PSU stocks of late have not really created wealth for government and individual shareholders. Given that some of the PSU companies are great companies, they have a great advantage, access to mines, access to ore, why do you think PSU stocks of late have not managed to create a lot of wealth? And what is the government planning to do to fix it?
I think we had a series of interaction with the market participants, and we got quite a bit of a feedback on what's happening in the stock markets for the CPSCs. Certainly, there has been a bit of a concern that the investors who are investing in the PSU stocks haven't been really so gung-ho about it. And the government has actually recognized this issue, and we've taken multi-pronged action on that score. The first, I think, the issue of price overhang that we had through our ETFs. I think we have recognized and we have clarified that equity ETFs, we are going for a big pause, long pause. Because I think that's what that's had been worrying the market, also the investors. The second, we have said that on the minority stake sale, we will be selective in our approach. We will be looking into stock by stock and looking at where the liquidity is less, the market requires more liquidity, and where we have a minimum public shareholding norms of SEBI to be complied with. These will be probably be focusing on, and in OFSs as well, it will be the selective, and it will not be repeated in the same stock. This is the second decision that we have communicated to the markets. The third decision that we have taken and informed all the CPSCs is on consistent dividend policy. I think dividend is something which normally the PSU has been, CPSCs have been quite concentrating on. But I think this message is not really going across. And what we have been telling is that we may have a frequent interim dividends, not necessarily once annually. Maybe if we have a larger dividend to give, even some of the CPSCs can come even quarterly or half-yearly interim dividends. And a consistent dividend policy has been announced, and I think that will see a lot of traction with investors who are looking for dividend stocks. The fourth is also linked to the performance of the CPSCs itself. While it's true that some of the CPSCs are in infrastructure space, which has been earlier hit by COVID, but recovery has taken place, or recovery is going to take place, and they're working very hard at it during COVID times also. For example, I can tell you the Shipping Corporation of India worked very, very hard during COVID time, in fact, had record profits and turnover during that time, and so is with several of power companies and others. So I think this issue is also being highlighted with the CPSCs, that while we take the capex, we also keep in mind that our asset turnover ratio, our sales to assets ratio is also maintained, so that the investors have something to take upside from the growth story. So these are broadly four things, and I would also say our emphasis on buybacks. So where we have excess cash available, we have actually really asking the CPSEs to share it with shareholders in the form of buybacks. And I think several of the CPSEs have announced buybacks, and some buybacks are also in progress.
Mr. Pandey, so can I safely assume that companies where government off late has reduced their stake via the ETF route, and where the government ownership is nearing 52%, there will be no further divestment there? A case in point here really could be NTPC.
Well, that's correct. I think unless we have a dire need, and we don't see any dire need of that kind, because I think our emphasis is on currently on strategic disinvestment, and strategic disinvestment pipeline we want to create actually in terms of privatization of and in fact transfer of management control, and some of the our focus is on some of these key transactions which were announced by the cabinet, which have to be taken to their logical culmination.
Mr. Pandey, while disinvestment is one part where government can create resources, but if you make these PSUs more efficient, and efficiency could be a function of productivity, it could be a function of talent, and it could be a function of rebooting their culture, that automatically will create more shareholder value if you start working on return ratios and the leakages. What is the plan in place to fix productivity issues with some of the PSUs?
These are the two factors will be increasingly become important. The MOU system, which is actually guiding the PSU, there's a memorandum of understanding which is signed with the administrative ministry, overseen by the Department of Public Enterprises. Recently, DIPAM has been a part of it, and we have suggested several changes to the MOU, trying to focus on some of these things, including the input from the market. So I think increasingly CPSC have been asked to engage with the market on the one hand. At the same time, also now the MOUs would have to much more to do with what the market has been measuring the companies for. So market cap is increasingly going to be an important factor forward, and so is the asset monetization plans of the CPSC. Wherever they have a non-core assets which aren't yielding returns, I think those could be monetized. And we have asked the CPSCs to also prepare their asset monetization plan, particularly focus on non-core assets.
Have you identified companies where there is a lot of land and non-core assets which really could be monetized? And the reason I'm asking you this question is just for the benefit of our viewers, Mr. Pandey, because when the PSUs were incorporated, the bent of the economy was very, very different. That time, government was keen to run many businesses. Now, frankly, things have changed and times have changed, and government should not be in a lot of these businesses.
And that's correct, and that is why we are saying strategic disinvestment, and by way of privatization. And I think some of the after a long time we are actually progressing forward in terms of privatization cases. For example, in case of Air India, in case of BPCL, today we have announced the EOI. We have invited the global invite for expression of interest for Shipping Corporation of India, and very soon we will be coming out for BEML and NINL. These two companies also going forward will also have EOIs. and finally, maybe a little while later on Noncore.
How would you defend a market concern that disinvestment, whether it's non-core or strategic, is always difficult because there are various layers of approvals and procedures which are required? This is something which is a obvious concern. How do you plan to address it?
I think this, the decisions are being taken. So that's not the point. The point is that the first requirement is requirement of will, which is reflected in actually cabinet deciding it. And then, of course, the execution, which will also be quite dependent on, the way we are able to work together. That means bureaucracy, which I think we have, for example, from DIPAM, I can say that there is a tremendous amount of cooperation. We are getting it from our administrative ministries, without whose help I think we can't move forward. But also, it's also a condition of market interest and the market conditions. So going forward, we can see that there will be a much better market conditions for strategic sale. And even now, these are recovering. I mean, as I said, we have some certainly a setback in terms of COVID initially. And now I think these disinvestments are back on the track. But you are right that it will also depend upon the factors, is how efficiently we work for approvals and how efficiently the markets are coming forward to participate in competitive bidding.
Let's talk about the big one, Mr. Pandey, BPCL. I'm using public information here. There is Vedanta and there are PE players. Is government open to selling stake or strategic stake to a PE player? Because ultimately government is looking at monetizing the value of BPCL. Are you looking at a energy company to sell the stake who understands the business, or are you open to financial investors who are also interested in bidding?
We don't make a pick and choose because that's not the way our system works. Our system is quite transparent. What is the bidding criteria, who are the people who can bid for, is defined in the expression of interest itself. And after the expression of interest, it's basically their competitive bidding, so which takes place. So there are no we are not in the business of picking and choose. It's a competitive bidding process.
Fair point. I appreciate that frank answer, sir. Would you like to give me a timeline for BPCL? More than 6 months, less than 6 months?
Well, I mean, it depends upon how it moves forward, because right now we are sanguine that it will move all right, because I think the major hurdle has been crossed in terms of the EOI. And now it's a question of the due diligence and then the bidding, and then the usual open offer procedures in SEBI, condition precedents materializing and signing off. So I think quite possible less than 6 months.
Okay. Is there a hurdle rate beyond which government is unlikely to sell some of their stakes in strategic deals? I mean, is there a reserve internal benchmark beyond which you would say, look, this is the minimum pricing which we need for some of the strategic stakes, and beyond which we will not sell?
Our valuation methodology, which is publicly available, envisages a reserve price fixation, which will be done after the financial bids are received. And subject to that, the government will decide. So there is a process of reserve price fixation, but that will be done only after the financial bids are received.
The big one is LIC, sir. And it's not going to be easy to take LIC public. When I speak to the LIC chairman, he's assured me every time that, look, we are working towards this and we should be ready somewhere in 2021. I'm going to take out FY21, but within FY22 somewhere, second half of FY22, first half of FY22, will India see its biggest life insurance company going public?
I think we are proceeding towards that objective, and we're confident that we can achieve it. Our preparatory work has been on. Parallelly, legislative work is being handled by the Department of Financial Services, and very soon we will be appointing the actuarial firm, the independent actuarial firm, for embedded value evaluation. So these preparations will then lead to firming up our IPO and then going to the market. So I would say in the next FI, it should be possible, maybe just about mid of the next FI.
Would you be going for an IPO, or there could also be a way in which companies unlock their value, which is that they go for a strategic private placement before the IPO to discover the benchmark and the reserve price?
No, I mean, none of these things have been there, but I think the announcement is clear that it is listing.
The finance minister on the budget day did announce that IDB Bank and the stake there is going to be divested. What's the update there? Because IDB has just successfully raised money via the open market. So the appetite from investors to invest into IDB Bank is also back, and the bank is back on its feet now.
Yes, I think the bank is proceeding well, and I think hopefully it should be out of the PCA, and its NPAs are well under control. So all those indicators are in positive directions, and we would be taking a decision soon. I think the cabinet will take a decision soon in this matter, and then we will proceed. First of all, I think an in-principle decision is there. Of course, Honorable Finance Minister has already announced it in the budget.
One low-hanging fruit, Mr. Pandey, is Suti. You've been making some transactions there, but some large companies like ITC, you still have a large ownership. Is there a view that Suti's government will still own stake in Suti, or it's a matter of time that entire investment would be encashed?
I think that call will be taken later, because there are certain other obligations still to be done. I think there are some obligations within Suti, so it's not obligation free yet. So those liabilities need to be, serviced.
One low-hanging fruit is also government's residual stake in Hindustan Zinc. Is the government keen to sell that stake?
Yes, I think the government had initially, this is a cabinet decision of, I think, the previous government, probably 2014. But thereafter, I think there was a PIL, and there was this was stopped by, there was a stay granted by Honorable Supreme Court. The case is now sub judice.
Fair point. I appreciate that, sir. How many companies are you planning to take public from the government stable in next 12 months? Mazgaon has been a successful IPO. Hindustan Aeronautic has done rather well. Are you thinking on those lines?
Well, I think IPOs, yes, very much, because, like bringing stock to the market. And in fact, LIC IPO also in that direction, that where there is no liquidity, we bring the liquidity to the market. And I think also the minimum public shareholding is also linked to the liquidity. That means something minimum should be available in the market. So I think those will continue to be our priorities.
Are you delighted that Air India has got multiple interests The last week, what update we got is that not one but handful of companies have expressed interest in investing into Air India.
Well, I think it is a very important thing because Air India, we have been trying to do it for the last more than 2 years, and first round it was not successful. In Air India, there's a lot of money which goes from the government exchequer, the taxpayers' money, into Air India, every year and every month, rather, I would say. So I think the government, it is not possible for the government to continue to put the taxpayers' money into Air India, and at a certain stage, it is fair point for the government to say that it should be actually divested, and that's the decision which has been taken. So anything which moves forward along those directions, I think it will be in the interest of everyone.
So next 6 months, BPCL and Air India, can we see can we see a strategic sale in both? Because that really is going to, light up the spirit and, re-rate the PSU stocks. Imagine next 6 months, BPCL, a strategic investment, Air India, you're able to find a solution.
We really hope so.
What is your view on banks? We understand that government is keen to divest majority stake in few banks. RBI 3 weeks ago, a story which my colleague Ruchi Bhatia broke, has already in principle put a draft guideline which says corporate should be allowed to own ownership, majority ownership. Are you open to the idea?
I think that's the question best put to the Department of Financial Services.
Okay. What are the other large government assets which potentially may not excite the market, but those are large revenue sources you would like to monetize? Land, stadiums, airports. Is there a plan in place, sir? I know there's a plan in place, but just for the benefit of our viewers, if you would like to share with us.
Well, I think the asset monetization is a wide subject, and it is in the form of different kinds of transactions. For example, I would rather say that it could be broadly divided into 2 parts. One would be the core asset monetization. Another is the asset monetization of the non-core assets. When I say core assets, it is the assets which are actually being used actively in operations. However, you could actually carve out and then use that proceeds by getting investors in and get that proceeds to either reduce your debt or to fund your growth, other plans, capex plans. Now that's the kind of a model which is there in case of InvITs and REITs, and also it could be TOTs by the NHAI and so on. The railways could do that as well. Those are the kind of, and I think pipelines could be done. Maybe some of those other assets could be done. So that's a process which is already on. The other part, the second type of transactions of asset monetization in the form of PPP. For example, the airport.
Yes, Mr. Pandey, we can hear you.
Yeah, for example, the major ports could also be, they could have PPP berths, and that's how I think several of their, container berths and other jetties, etc., are being given on PPP mode. So the railways can use the PPP mode for the stations or for other things. So that's one way of asset monetization also. The third category, as I said, this is the first 2 categories are the core group. One is the PPP side, another is the TOTs, REITs, and InvITs. The other part is, of course, the non-core assets. And then non-core assets are basically the ones where, sitting may perhaps idle there. And, there, for example, could be excess land in terms of townships and so on. And there's a possibility. There could be a railways, for example, could have some land within the cities where, for their own housing, which can be, monetized partly for their own housing, partly for making it available outside for the markets. Some models like this are being tried in the city. For example, in urban development, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs are doing it by using their own land and then trying to use NBCC for creating their own housing infrastructure by providing some availability of some space for them to monetize. So this is a cross subsidization model or a cross model. So these are various models which are possible. But I believe that both on the core and the non-core side, there will be a lot more movement, both in the government as well as in the CPSE space.
How much realistically you will be able to achieve, Mr. Pandey, in next 12 to 18 months? I mean, the option is there. It's like a buffet right now. A lot of things, lot of demand, and a lot of takers are there. But how much, given that there are compulsions, there are procedures, there are global circumstances, you will be able to achieve?
Well, in many sense, there's a lot of these things which the CPSEs do or what. They're listed companies and others, the proceeds actually go back to them. They don't come back to the government. So it's also, but nevertheless, it's a question of, it's one way of, reducing the debt or to increase their, capex plans, to put in their capex plans. So it's actually case to case, it will differ. When the government departments, if they have their priorities, they have to see, to what extent they can, part with land, so identifying surplus land and so on. So I think we are basically, I think as DIPAM, we are nudging the CPSCs and the government departments to move in that direction through asset monetization plans, so that they have a better focus and then they can actually learn. And we have also, for the non-core, we have also worked out now with the World Bank as a capacity building model, where a lot more capacity needs to be created across departments and CPSCs in order to monetize, because these are complex transactions. There's a lot of technical work which needs to be done. So there has to be an in-house availability, even though they might seek market inputs of transaction advisors. There has to be an in-house capability to process this.
I have two more follow-up questions for you, Mr. Pandey. And last but one question is that when it comes to selling any government asset, there historically we've seen a resistance which comes at various levels, even at the company level, at the labor level. Some of the assets which you're planning to sell, sir, are labor-dominated assets. They're dominated by unions. How easy it will be for you to do strategic stakes? Normal stake sale, yes, nobody's life changes. But in a strategic sale or a spin-off of a non-core asset, lives, labor, employees, things will change.
Well, that's correct, because there is always and will always be resistance to anything which you reform. So that has to be faced and dealt with. Stakeholders have to be consulted with. They have to see a greater merit in what we are trying to do. So after all, any reform would mean there's a lot of hard work and change of attitudes and minds which need to be there before it gets really ingrained.
Mr. Pandey, Personally, for you as the Secretary of DIPAM, a department where everybody has high hopes, because this is one department which in a sense can really reboot the entire PSU valuations and PSU companies. What are the personal benchmarks and targets you've set for yourself personally? I mean, if I may ask, what is your New Year resolution as the DIPAM Secretary?
No, I don't have personal targets. I mean, the department's targets and department's work is my work. So we are a part of the team. So I'm a person who is a part of the team and not really a person by itself.
But no personal resolutions for New Year's? Exercise more, eat less. That was my last year resolution, exercise more and eat less. I failed to achieve both this year. What is your personal New Year resolution?
No, I think I am personally very happy that we have together as a community in the government, as a bureaucracy, coped very well with the impact that the COVID had in terms of changing our practices, and we're doing so much of work online as the rest of the rest of the people as well as you. So the government has really kept pace in terms of that, working across through this and trying to have safety as well as productivity. And so this is a good learning, but we can only hope that going forward we'll have a some better news on the COVID front in terms of its thing and all that, so that a lot of initiatives that we have been taking, they go fast forward.
Well, Mr. Pandey, on behalf of the 18 Out team, season's greeting, wish you a wonderful year ahead, and I know 2021 will be an important year for you, and we all are hoping that your department, your team, and you're able to create magic, and the shareholders of PSU Stocks, they really get the true value of some of the great companies currently have been built by the government.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.